Hello, nerds! Thank you for joining me here on Nerd News Clips. This is the second channel. This is the place for all of the short-form content as well as the individual sections and just generally speaking smaller things. If you are into the longer form content, youtube.com/generallynerdy is the place to go see that. With that out of the way, let's get into this. Is where we're at. Let's start with the That Just Happened section, which is, again, just kind of the things that I have interacted with in the span of the last week that have come out. So in TV streaming, we got a new episode of both House of the Dragon and the first episode of Interview with the Vampire. So let's talk House of the Dragon first. I thought it was effective in moving the story forward, effective in kind of really fleshing out these characters that we're dealing with in a lot of ways, and it worked super well. I think one thing that absolutely did not work, and the majority of the internet I think would agree with me, is these weird day for night filters that they put on this episode. It was an official announcement that it was an artistic direction that they decided to go in. There is never, ever a good reason to do day for night filters. Ever. Unless it is a scheduling conflict and you are forced into doing it, there is never a good artistic reason to do that. I guess I should clarify. Because it always looks like garbage. And you can always see where the sun is, even though you're using these day for night filters. And it always obscures the image that we're watching. So it makes it much more difficult to tell exactly what's going on because your brain can't quite process all of the issues that are happening in front of your eyes. The other prime example of this, and I can't even remember the name of the movie, but it's the one that Will Smith did where he was the clone of himself. So there's old Will Smith and young Will Smith in the same movie, and they're both secret agents or whatever. I think it was Ang Lee that was the director of that movie, and he shot the entire movie in 120 frames per second, which in and of itself is ridiculous. But yeah, there is a very distinctive scene that is supposed to be happening in the middle of the night in that movie that is very clearly happening in the middle of the day because the sun is almost directly overhead. So it screws all of the shadows and any of the artistic things that might be going on in there just totally shot by the fact that the sun and the shadows don't correspond with what our brains are expecting. So very similar situation here in this House of the Dragon episode is the sun isn't quite overhead for the entire time, but it is very obviously up. So the fact that this is supposed to be night does not play at all. It just looks like they got some schmutz on the camera lens and couldn't get it off for a while. And then when it transitions back to indoor shots, like your eyes have to adjust. So that's even more distracting. Again, even though we are learning a whole hell of a lot about these characters that is presumably going to be very important by the time we get to the end of this season of this show. So if you're doing these artistic decisions with the image, maybe do it on an episode that doesn't have as much story elements. That's not the words to use. Maybe do it on an episode that doesn't compel the story forward in such great lengths as this one does. So you have a little bit more breathing room so we don't have to be paying attention to the words being spoken. We can look at your visuals and then it won't be as distracting, I guess. But either way, like I said at the beginning of this, it's always a bad idea unless there are scheduling constraints that you cannot get around to do this. The only time I have ever seen this done in a way that makes any kind of sense was with the Shazam movie. The convenience store scene was shot in the middle of the day. It looks like it's the middle of the night because when they're in the store, they have day for night filters on the windows for the store, so they don't have it directly on the camera. So the camera is still processing proper color. And then when they're outside of the convenience store, they actually shot that at night. So yeah, that's where we're at with House of the Dragon. But the other episode that we need to talk about, Interview with the Vampire, dropped its first episode for this new series. And Oh, we have a little bit to unpack here because we've been kind of building up to this show, right? So we have the previous comments that were addressed in the shoutouts and viewer mail episode over on the Clips channel. And this kind of... Yeah, all right, let's just get there. So, Interview with the Vampire, I've read all of the books except for the most recent two, and honestly, what are very likely to be the last two, at least the last two written by Anne Rice, as she has sadly passed. So I'm pretty well versed in these books, and at least the overall lore for the books, because it's been so long since I read the first book. I can't say specifically that I remember expertly the very first book, because I've read so much in this universe that kind of contradicts what happens in the first book, because the first book is the only book that is told through the eyes of Louis. Everything else is told through the eyes of Lestat, and he remembers things differently, as he would, because he's a different character. So I'm processing this more through that prism of Lestat saw things happen this way, and this is where every other story has built, is from Lestat's point of view. So when we get the changes from Louis, there's a little bit that I had to kind of look up and process and really kind of analyze and think about. So that being said, I think that this version of this story is fantastic. I'm not going to go so far yet to say that I love it. I love the setup. I love that we get a fully fleshed out Louis. We see his family. We don't just get told about his family. We actually see the bonds that he has with his family in this. Totally works. Now, the elephant in the room as it pertains to Louis. There have been a number of dramatic changes. So somebody in the comments section of one of the other videos said something along the lines of, "Oh, they're just what is the set dressing? It's superficial." It was the implication. The changes that they've made are superficial. I wholeheartedly disagree. There is nothing superficial about changing the century from which this person originates from. In the book, Louis comes from the 18th century. He comes from New Orleans, is where he meets Lestat, which it happened. That's how it happens here in the series as well. But it's from 1780. So in this series, it's 1910. That is 130 years difference. A lot of history happened in that time. So that's, I think, the biggest reason why this series works. Or at least the very first episode, I can't speak for the series, but the very first episode works so well is because it does take into consideration who the actor is playing this character. And because the actor is a person of a certain skin tone, and it is historical fiction, in order to make it believable historical fiction, you have to address that issue. And they do that. They do that well. They do that perfectly. I seriously only have one issue with this, and we're going to get to that. But yeah, so once you understand that they have very explicitly changed the nature of Louis, and they make it so a lot of people say this, and I don't think that a lot of people. I think this is a thing that people say because other people say it, and not necessarily a thing that they honestly believe. But a lot of people say that Brad Pitt's Louis in the movie was a lot more quote-unquote emo from the Louis in the book. I would tend to disagree, but not greatly disagree. Yes, Louis is characterized very differently in the book than he is in the original movie. I will definitely give you that. But he is still weak. He's very timid. He is the kind of, in a lot of ways, the antithesis to Lestat, which is the point. In a lot of ways, this new version of Louis, I didn't put down the actor's name again, even though I love this guy. I think he's so great, especially now. this new version of Louis is so much more headstrong and is definitely, like, you can see him break. And I think that's the thing that people are talking about, how they quote unquote nailed it from the book to the series versus the book to the original movie. Because in the original movie, we don't get a lot of strength from that character. We get a little bit of it in the book. We get a whole heaping truckload of it in this series. And that is what makes Louis a well-rounded character, something that Anne Rice was very not able to do the first 2 times around. So this is, I think, my favorite iteration of this character, Louis. So yeah, there have been a significant amount of changes, but they work super well, super well. And so you can see the strength, you can see where this character is and how he got there and why he is this kind of callous version of himself. And then you see that break at the end of this episode and you see him just torn apart. And Lestat swoops in because Lestat is the orchestrator of that breakdown. Lestat is the one who caused all of these things, horrible things, to happen in Louis' life. And then he gives him effectively no choice but to join him in his greatest moment of weakness. And that is exactly the characterization of Lestat that I had in my head from reading the books. So yes, in that respect, I agree with the people in the comment section who said, oh, they've nailed it. Yeah, Lestat is 100% the Lestat that I remember reading, for sure. Physicality and characterization, both. I think Sam Reed, I'm sorry that that's the only actor's name I remember. I think Sam Reed is doing great things with Lestat, but I think that Johnson, I think that the other dude's name is something Johnson. I think that his portrayal of Louis is even better than Lestat's, because Lestat is exactly who he is in the book, but Louis is something original unto himself, and I think that's even better because it's a more believable character. Okay, so the one issue that I do have with this as of the first episode is the sexuality of these vampires. So I don't care that they're being portrayed as gay necessarily. I think that when you portray these vampires as quote unquote, I think he said the word homosexual, I think that's missing the point. If you were to put a word on the sexuality of the vampires in the books that Anne Rice wrote, I think the more appropriate term for the sexuality of the vampires is pansexual, because they don't care what the gender or anything like that is with the person that they're romantically or otherwise involved with. What is important to them is the beauty of this creature as well as the desirability of this creature. And it has nothing to do with plumbing. It has everything to do with what's in their ears and how their blood tastes, or between their ears, I guess I should say. So and maybe we're going to get to a point in this series, I'll leave this door open for sure. Maybe we're going to get to a point in this series where Louis kind of redefines and says, well, I'm just attracted to beauty, because that's the way Lestat portrays it. That's the way, if you go back and read Memnoch, Lestat falls in love with a woman in a human woman, no less, in Memnoch. So yeah, I feel like we're missing the point a little bit, because they're obsessed with beauty, not sex. And in this show, it's more just the sexy bits and not as much the beauty, especially because Lestat kills whatever. So yeah, there is a minor issue I have there, but even that, because if you consider it that it is a different version of this story, then if that's the way they go forward with it, I mean, I'm still probably going to have a little bit of an issue with it, but it works either way. So not a major issue at all. But that is what just happened. So let's get into the actual news of the day, shall we? Oh, I've just rambled about television shows for a moment. I need to reconsult my notes. All right. So follow-ups. We're gonna get into the news. Starting follow-ups. We have a casting announcement for the Time Bandits series that Taika Waititi is going to be producing. Lisa Kudrow has been brought in for an undisclosed role at this point into the Terry Gilliam remake that is going over to Netflix. We're going to keep right along with casting announcements. We got casting and visuals for the following characters in the Titans series as of season 4. We got Brother Blood, Mother Mayhem, and Jinx. Brother Blood will be played by Joseph Morgan. Mother Mayhem will be played by Franka Potente. And Jinx will be played by Lisa Ambalavanar. I know I mispronounced that wrong, or I know I pronounced that wrong. I apologize. And the suits that were made that you should be seeing on your screen if you're watching the episode are from Team LJ Supersuits, who have been making suits for CW shows and the Warner Brothers shows for some time. So they look really great. I really dig that Brother Blood and the Jinx. I think they're freaking phenomenal. But this also gives us the idea of where they come from. So these suits are being modeled off of, actually, at the very least, the Brother Blood and I believe Jinx as well, are being modeled off of the current comic book for the Titans, which is being written by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. This just looks phenomenal. I'm super stoked for season 4. I kind of have to play a little bit of catch up with the Titans show, but yeah, gonna be great. And these suits look fantastic. Next, we have Dune Sisterhood has also announced some new casting. We have Emily Watson and Shirley Henderson have reportedly been cast in the series as the 2 leads. They're going to be playing 2 Harkonnen sisters who the series is going to be revolving around. Now, if you'll remember that the Dune Sisterhood series that is coming to HBO Max is going to be a prequel, not a direct prequel. It's going to be taking place roughly 10,000 years before the events of the movies that are currently going on as directed by Denis Villeneuve. So, yeah. Super stoked about this. I think any adaptation right now of Dune is going in a fantastic direction. I think the casting here, not super familiar with either of those actors offhand, but I'm not going to be bad, I don't think, at all. Next up on the follow-ups list, we have Frasier. No longer just a pilot episode. It is going to full series as ordered by Paramount Plus before we even see a pilot episode, so that's good. I also heard a rumor that we're not going to cover in the rumor section because rumor section is a whole beast unto itself this episode, but I also heard a rumor that this new series is going to circumvent the fact that we're not going to be getting all of the characters from the original series returning by putting Frasier into a new city. So that could be interesting, if that's true at all. And then we have our final, and this one makes me really sad. Our final follow-up in the TV streaming section is that the Grendel series on Netflix that was supposed to be based on the Dark Horse series by Matt Wagner has been canceled. All of that in spite of the fact that apparently they were done with principal photography. They were moving into post-production. So that means that it very well could be shopped around to a different streaming service. So hopefully, and we will definitely be keeping tabs on this one, hopefully we will see Grendel in the future, but it will not be coming from Netflix. So that is what we have for follow-ups. So let's get into trailers. We got 2 new trailers. First up is, and actually both trailers come from Netflix, and both are series that we've been keeping tabs on. So the first one is, I believe, the final trailer for Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. October 25th is when this one launches, so we have about 3 weeks before we get to watch it, but oh my God, the cast in this show. Each episode, it's an anthology show, so each episode is going to be a standalone episode, but wow, there are so many big names in this. I can't even list them here. Go watch the trailer and see how many you can find. Next is Unsolved Mysteries, Volume 3. Is going to be coming out in 3 spurts. We have October 18th for the first 3 episodes, October 25th for the second 3 episodes, and then November 1st for the final 3 episodes for Volume 3 of Unsolved Mysteries. And again, new trailer, getting a little more in line with what we expect from OG Unsolved Mysteries, where there's a bit more of the bizarre and potentially supernatural involved. At least that's what they're leading us to believe with this new trailer. So could be awesome. Let's keep tabs on that. And then we have no regular ass news because, again, we are getting towards the end of the year, and such things generally don't happen quite as frequently in these final 3 months. So let's get into TV streaming suggestions, and just to wash the flavor out of your mouth of that silly Netflix Munsters show, I am going to recommend The Munsters. You can watch it. There's a whole channel dedicated to the Munsters over on Pluto TV, so go check out some Munsters action there. Or if you have the DVDs, I don't know where else it might be streaming, but go check out the Munsters, because you gotta appreciate where it comes from, because where it is now is not even half as good. So that is your recommendation for the week. Once again, this has been just a brief segment from the larger episode that has been posted over on the main channel, youtube.com/generallynerdy. Go over there for the long form content, or just subscribe here if you want it in bite-sized chunks. Thank you very much for joining me, nerds. We'll see you in the next one. Before we go though, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.